The cost of mining one Bitcoin in Ethiopia is about $20,000 when hardware, staffing and other costs added along with the cheap electricity. But that Bitcoin then sells for around $114,000 at current prices.
Ethiopia has rapidly become one of the biggest Bitcoin mining hubs in the world. I believe right now approximately 5% of all Bitcoin is being mined right here in Ethiopia. Over the past few years, we've built up quite a big footprint of mining machines here. And whenever I share the opportunity of mining in Ethiopia with people in my network, in my environment that aren't really familiar with this environment, Ethiopia, Africa, Bitcoin mining, there's always a few questions that always pop up. The first question I get is, how do the locals look at the Bitcoin miners? Do they believe that they're simply robbing their country for profits? The second question that I get, how stable is the country? And I wanted to get someone that's an expert of these topics, and I invited Kal. Welcome here, Kal. Thank you for hopping on this interview with me. You have a very strong brand. When I did my research prior to this trip, I looked up Bitcoin mining in Ethiopia, and there's one name that kept on popping up left and right on interviews of BBC, Al Jazeera, and was always your name. And we have a mutual connection, which fortunately made an introduction, and that's why we're here. And I'm very interested to hear your perspective on the current state of Bitcoin mining in Ethiopia and where you believe that this industry might head.
Very well. Thank you for having me, Mitchell, and thank you for coming to Ethiopia to do this story. I think it's often overlooked, and Ethiopia probably needs a series of rebranding activities because right now, Bitcoin miners have contributed $220 million to our power authorities in just 1 year of activities. And next year, they're aiming to double that. And within 5 years, I think it might be fair to say our power authorities will be generating more than $1 billion a year from Bitcoin miners. So I think this is a very interesting industry for our country, which is increasingly energy rich. That energy coming from hydroelectric sources along the Nile River, which starts in Ethiopia, or I should say 80% of which starts in Ethiopia. Mm-hmm. And so this is the reality today. We have more than 25 Bitcoin miners operating here, operating very large facilities and purchasing energy in large quantities from our producer, which we call Ethiopian Electric Power.
Yep.
And so I think the industry has seen a positive reception, and I think we will continue to see an increase in Bitcoin miners coming to Ethiopia.
Okay. That's really nice to hear. In the Netherlands, we are a small country where I'm originally from, and we have depending on how you look at it, we have either dark or golden era in our past, and it's the era of the East Indian trading company. So we used to sail over the world, we used to go to Asia, we used to go to Africa, and we took a lot of their resources and we sold them in Europe for a big profit. And that's how a lot of wealth was made, not only in the Netherlands, but in England, in Spain, in Portugal. So there is a segment of people, whenever I tell this story, they believe that this is a repeat of that chapter in history, that we are simply robbing Africa's resources. So in your opinion, in your perspective, how are the locals looking at this industry right now?
Sure. I think it's fair to bring up comparisons, but when you look at the realities of what our power producers are doing, they're selling electricity at a premium. So the residential community will pay roughly 1 cent kilowatt hour. The commercial community will pay roughly 2 cents kilowatt hour. And the Bitcoin miners, after taxes, they're paying almost 4 cents kilowatt hour. So our power authorities understand that there is let's call it a discrepancy of purchasing power between the Bitcoin miners that are often coming with capital, strong amounts of capital, and the local community, which is obviously can't compete with that type of purchasing power. So this premium ensures that these Bitcoin miners will help subsidize the residential and the commercial community. Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing that Our additional hydroelectric construction projects are being completed on time. So Koisha is now at 70% completion.
That's another hydro dam?
Another hydro dam that's going to add to 1,700 megawatts into the national grid.
Yeah. Green energy.
Green energy, extremely green. And so I don't see it as though our residential community is competing with the Bitcoin miners. I see the Bitcoin miners as supporting and even subsidizing just about everyone else.
Yeah.
And so I see it as a positive.
Nice. Yeah, what people often forget as well is building out all this infrastructure requires a lot of capital. So for example, the GERD, which is one of the largest hydro dams in the world, how much energy is it producing? Do you know?
Yes,
figures?
It should be producing 5 gigawatts. I think right now it's still increasing its phases, so it might not be there yet.
Okay, so it's going towards 5 gigawatts. That's a massive amount of energy. But all of that energy needs to be distributed throughout the whole country, right?
Correct.
And then people often forget that you need to build power lines, you need to build substations, and all of that costs a lot of money, a lot of capital. Also, you're talking about building out other hydro dams or other energy generation projects, also needs a lot of capital. So do I understand it correctly that we as Bitcoin miners, we are producing a lot of that capital, a lot of that profit that is required to build out that infrastructure for the rest of Ethiopia?
Absolutely. To put things in perspective, Bitcoin miners are utilizing roughly 20 to 30% of Ethiopia's entire electricity output. And so that's stranded energy. It's not competing with the residential public. And it's also fair to say 20 to 30% of Ethiopian Electric Power's revenue is being supported by the Bitcoin mining industry. And so you've touched on a few points that income, that revenue is going into further building out our infrastructure. So what that means in numbers is we have 25 active power stations. We'll be building another 10 over the next 10 years or so. We have 192 substations. We're building more and more every day. And then we have roughly 30,000 kilometers of transmission lines, and we're building more and more every day. So these are the activities that need to happen for electricity to get into the rural corners of Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And I think our power authorities are doing that successfully.
Nice. Then something else that often pops up is Western media often portrays Africa as this one big continent with a lot of chaos, war, instability. But when we look at Ethiopia specifically, Ethiopia was actually one of the fastest growing economies of the past decade. If I understand the numbers correctly, I think it grew between 8 to 14% per year almost. Whereas in the Netherlands, we're growing with 1 to 2% per year, US 3 to 4% per year. So that's very impressive growth that you guys have been able to realize. And I'm quite curious, how did Ethiopia go from, let's say, a poor country to a rapidly developing country like it is right now?
Sure. So we have a very young population, 75% under the age of 27. And we have a very large population, bordering on 130 million. And I think geographically, Ethiopia sits at a very interesting place, right in between the East and the West. And Ethiopian Airlines allows both tourists and business customers to come in and visit. So you have all of these things that I think allow for growth. But I think the other issue is we're starting from a very low base. So Ethiopia from 1974 to 1991 was a communist nation. And so 91, we successfully removed those communists. 95, we instilled a new constitution. 2000, we began kind of our industrialization, our development. A lot of our ambitious infrastructure projects were meant to support and strengthen our economy.
Yeah.
And so today, I think we've reached some semblance of a free market, of a private sector that can stand on its own.
Yeah.
We've invited in hundreds, if not thousands, of FDI, foreign direct investors, that have supported in all industries from agriculture to construction, manufacturing, and so on.
Yeah.
And so that's how Ethiopia has grown. There's still a lot of headwinds, as you've mentioned. There's still a lot of, we can call it rural challenges or ethnic challenges because of our very diverse landscape, especially in the north corners of Ethiopia.
Yeah.
But for the most part, when you look at safety and when you look at kind of well-being, especially when you're talking about the capital, Addis Ababa, it's a great place to live. It's a great place to raise your family and so on. And so I think we're going to slowly rid that old brand of famine and disease, and hopefully enter a new brand of energy production and manpower and human capital. Hopefully, be getting real capital.
Yeah, I think actually this current chapter that Ethiopia's in with Bitcoin mining, I do believe it's a very great PR opportunity for Ethiopia to rebrand itself. And I would really like to see at one point that people in the West also wake up to realize that their mindset that everything is better in their country is not always true. We were talking about that as well, like Europe, US, even though, yes, they have great economies, great quality of life, but it isn't always that safe. They always also have their own societal problems. And I believe the big opportunities are here in this continent, in Africa. So I'm really excited that we've been able to discover that, and that we are also able to contribute to rebranding this continent, rebranding Ethiopia, making more people aware of that they should sometimes look beyond what they know and beyond what they see on the news.
Absolutely.
And you're also doing a really great job in that.
Thank you.
Super nice.
I can say the same to you. I think it's going to be a kind of a learning period for the whole world. And I think also there's the opportunity. I love the idea of Balaji, ex-Coinbase, but he talks about the network state overcoming the nation state. And so, yes, Ethiopia is a beautiful nation with great history. But a lot of the youth that I talk to, a lot of the young people that I speak to on a daily basis, they're a part of the online community. And so I think that's great to see that technology can help people transcend borders.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the heart of Bitcoin is that as well, is that we're going to create a borderless world where true value can ascertain itself and can really help people in developing economies.
Totally. And let's briefly talk about Ethiopia's stability. So quite regularly after I do a webinar and I tell people about Bitcoin mining in Ethiopia, a certain segment of people are like, all right, this sounds great, I believe in it. Another segment of people is very skeptical. They believe that Ethiopia, or Africa in general, is unstable. And that's what's triggering a little bit of their fear and uncertainty about potentially placing some money here or placing some investment or doing any activities here. What is your perspective on political stability, especially here?
Sure. So I've been here for now 12 years. And during this time, I've seen many changes. I've seen two governments. I've seen many protests. And I've seen a few regional outbreaks that have turned into full-on wars. So there is a strong need for caution and understanding, especially our history, before making a decision on Ethiopia. But at the same time, I would, as a whole, say that it's an incredible place to do business. And the risk, or I should say the reward, is worth any risk. It's a very good economy. I think when you have this much interest in our industries, in our energy, we're the home of the African Union. We're the seat of the UNECA, the Economic Commission on Africa. So it's often regarded as the political gateway to Africa. And so what happens in Ethiopia, I think, is very important for all of Africa. But I would say, again, that the reward is worth the risk.
Yeah. When I was doing my research, you have this website where you can see the real dimensions of a country, because the globe that we are used to is not the actual dimensions of the real countries. They change the proportions a little bit, and you can then move countries across the globe and see how they compare to other countries. And I've come to the realization that Ethiopia is actually almost as big as the entirety of, let's say, Western Europe, all the way from Spain up till Scandinavia.
Yes.
And when I started to dig further into the facts, or when I was speaking to some guides and friends here in Ethiopia, they explained to me that Ethiopia is a country, like many countries, it consists of different tribes, right?
Absolutely.
And my understanding of the current conflict is that some of those tribes are not really on the best terms with each other, right? So there's some tension between. However, if you put that into context and look at different, let's say, countries, in China, there's also a part of China where they are, oppressing the Uyghurs, like a minority group. In the US, recently, there's a lot of clashes between Hispanic community. So every country has their own little problems. Yes, Ethiopia has it as well, but I do believe that sometimes in the media, because it's Africa, it can be super magnified. Mm-hmm. What is your perspective?
Yes, it can be magnified. Sometimes you have, violence selling newspapers, right? But it might not be true. It might be taken out of context. And I think for the most part, Ethiopia is safe. I've, again, been living here 12 years. I choose to raise my family here after having lived in the United States for 20 years of my life.
Yeah.
And so there are many cities in the United States that I would regard as unsafe. And so when we look at violence, or when we look at safety from a perspective of just kinetic energy, something might happen to me in Chicago or Oakland more often than Addis Ababa. Mm-hmm. Because again, although it's not organized and it's not political, it's still criminal and it's still kinetic. So because it is a large country, like I said, 130 million people, there needs to be a great deal of management. And I think we can go back to 1991 when Ethiopia began its constitution. And unfortunately, it's based on ethnic federalism, which maybe had its time and place, but it gives a lot of responsibilities to ethnicities. And I think as Bitcoiners, we can agree that identity is probably less important than your merit or your value or what you have to offer to the world.
Yeah.
And the United States sees this probably to a stronger degree, because if you go to the United States, a lot of their political arguments begins with, well, I'm black because, and then I have this identity, and then I'm somebody might be gay, or somebody might be this, or then it turns into this nightmare of identity, right? And you forgot about talking about the issue, and now you're talking about somebody's identity.
Yeah,
and it doesn't really get anywhere. And so we have this issue in Ethiopia. I don't think it's great, but I think these challenges exist everywhere.
Yeah, we even have it in the Netherlands. In Europe, you have it a lot as well. Okay, let's talk about your story. How did you end up becoming such a big advocate for mining in Ethiopia? How did you get to this point?
Well, I've been blessed. I think, of course, I've tried to put in the time to learn about Bitcoin, but it's been relatively recent, 5 years or so. I think instead, 2020, specifically June 30th, was the turning point. It was the day I got it. It was the day there was a very high-level assassination in Ethiopia. We lost internet for 3 weeks in the middle of the Corona COVID lockdowns. And it ushered in not only a new currency and a new bank rate with the dollar, but it also ushered in a civil war.
Yep.
And so that civil war started in, I'd say, October or November of 2020. And on April of 2021, I published my first piece of Bitcoin literature. And between the point of me discovering Bitcoin and me writing about Bitcoin, a lot happened in Ethiopia. I lost a good friend in the civil war. I went to Texas and hid away. He went to Tigray and went to go fight, right? So there was a lot of, let's call it heavy events during that period that allowed me to kind of be violently awoken into this truth.
Yeah.
And so by April 2021, I was publishing, I was writing, I was speaking using my real name. I began the road of education. I got great reception. I was covered by a lot of authors in the United States and so on, invited to speak at events and so on. And so I think it's an issue that clicks with a lot of people. Losing value is never fun. Some decisions by the state and regional actors can really lead into a nightmare for your population. And so all of that culminated into that year, and I was born a Bitcoiner, and I've gone from there.
Nice. You mentioned the civil war. Just to be clear, is this still ongoing right now? And how much of it are you and we experiencing here in Addis Ababa?
So no, the war is not happening. In 2022, I believe December, there was an official treaty signed once in Nairobi and then again in Pretoria. You had the African Union and a lot of leaders come to the table and say, okay, what's the issue? Is it borders? Is it weapons? Is it resources? And so you had a lot of elders. And now you actually have a lot from the previous government, that TPLF regional leadership, that have kind of included, or we call it madamar. It's the ideology of including all of our, ideologies and baggages, if you will. And so there is not a war between Ethiopia and Tigray. Unfortunately, there are still rebels. There are still warlords, as you would call them. There's a region, Amhara. There's a faction called Fano. I believe they're still active. So you might hear every now and then in kind of a rural area that someone lost their life, right? But here in the capital, Addis Ababa, I would say it's extremely safe. I would recommend enjoying our new corridors, our new avenues. The amount of building that's gone on over the past year or two has been very impressive.
I've seen it. So many new buildings popping up left and right.
Yeah, and they're for you. They're for investors. They're for people in the media. They're, to hopefully rid ourselves of this old, branding that's been pushed onto us and, come out new.
Yeah, nice. What about, so I want to continue a little bit about the current government. Like, how do you see regulation changing for Bitcoin miners in Ethiopia? Because there were also recently some rumors about the country stopping new licenses for Bitcoin miners, and I got some worried messages from people in my community about this. They saw it as a potential red flag. Like, is this going to be the moment where they're going to get rid of all the miners, that they're going to downscale it? Is my investment still safe? What is your perspective on that whole situation?
Yes, you're right. It is cause for concern. In March, maybe closer to February of this year, 2025, Ethiopian Investment Commission stopped giving out business licenses for cryptocurrency mining. And so it was a pause. In August, I learned that pause will be lifted. It's still a rumor, but what I heard was the pause will be lifted, but the power purchase agreements will no longer range from 50 to 150 megawatts. Instead, they'll be downsized to maybe 5 to 25 megawatts. And this is because, well, the Ethiopian government has been giving a lot of business licenses and a lot of PPAs, power purchase agreements, but those PPAs haven't been met. So you might have an investor with, 5,000 square meters and 75 megawatts on their agreement, but they've only utilized 5 or 10.
Yeah.
So the government wants to kind of rebalance. And the Ethiopian government wants to ensure that if they're supplying a miner with energy, that they're going to use that energy. And so I think that's the discussion we're having.
Okay.
There's also some rumor that Ethiopian government wants to enter mining themselves. So there was a MOU about 2 years ago with West Data Group. And I heard also there's a conversation with a new company regarding natural gas exploration and potentially using that as an energy source. So that would be interesting if the private sector is now competing with government-backed partners. How fair is that? Right? So I think there's a lot of questions we need to ask. But for the most part, I'm very proud of Ethiopia's willingness to move into this sector, to bring in now almost 30 companies and to be selling probably what's around a gigawatt of energy to the network.
Wow. So one issue is the issuance of new licenses. You said it's all about balancing supply and demand, rebalancing it, and making sure that they probably grow at a predictable and sustainable pace. What about existing miners? Do they have any risk of having their licenses revoked or their agreements being downscaled?
I don't think so, because when you have an agreement with Ethiopian Electric Power, a power purchase agreement, it's often long-term. It's often 5 years. And so to break that agreement on behalf of the government, I highly doubt they would do that. What I think might happen is, like I said, government might enter this industry through a partner. But yeah, I don't know if they would take away a business license, or they would take away somebody's power that's utilizing that power, because like I said, they're selling that energy at almost 4 times the residential rate. They are earning a heavy premium. So when it comes to the substations that have legally come here, that have land next to substations that can accommodate them, they're not in industrial or urban areas. They're often in rural areas. I don't think there's going to be any issue. Where I would maybe catch myself is there was an issue with the IT park near Addis Ababa. And the IT park is essentially an industrial park of players in IT, data and Bitcoin and so on. I believe there's 3 or 4 Bitcoin companies at this IT park. And I believe if the news that I was reading was true, the CEO of this IT park was arrested.
I heard about it. Yeah.
So now maybe there was fault, maybe there was not, right? An arrest doesn't mean he's indicted, but there might be some issue.
Some suspected mismanagement, right? To call it that. Yeah.
Exactly. And so these things are natural. I hate to cast blame before knowing any details, but when you have outpacing demand from Bitcoin miners, sometimes there will be issues of supply or mismanagement, etc.
Yeah. And what I've heard about that particular situation, about the mismanagement of the ICT park, I heard that now from higher up in the government, there were rumors that now they want to be more on top of the situation to further actually accelerate and help this industry to lift.
Absolutely. Actually, the best news that I've heard was from State Minister of Finance, Dr. Eyob Tekeleng, who has now been promoted to the governor of the National Bank of our central bank here in Ethiopia. And he was speaking to Shaggar FM about these Bitcoin miners coming in. And he said, look, if we run out of energy, if Ethiopia runs out of energy, then it should be the onus of these Bitcoin miners to help with the investment and build more production or power stations, dams and hydroelectric facilities and so on. And so I think as we learn more about the industry, as more ministers become very technical in the field and see what's going on, we'll have more champions. I wouldn't say we've won the fight yet. Every day I have conversations with people, and it's always a new journey. It's always a new challenge. But I think if we do all of our work, we can do a great job of educating our population, lobbying government, and protecting the industry.
Yeah, amazing. If you were to look, let's say, 10 years into the future, what do you expect this industry to be, and what do you hope it to be in the most optimal situation?
So I think this industry in 10 years has a very big shot at growing, 5 to 10x, because our power output is expected to grow to 45,000 megawatts. We're at roughly 8,000 megawatts right now. Our entire national grid is producing 8,000 megawatts. In 10 years, with the experiences we have, with the construction partners, Salini, Alstom, GE, CCEC, we have Voith Hydro, right? So all of these partners are helping us build more and more dams, which are going to allow us to invite more and more Bitcoin miners. And so from an energy perspective, I think Ethiopia will be energy rich. I think just like Saudi Arabia might give a petroleum check to its Emirati citizens, Ethiopia will be in a position to give a water check or a Nile check to its citizens because of all of the dividends from either Bitcoin miners or holding Bitcoin, which I think is also a conversation we'll begin to have as our capital controls loosen up.
Interesting. Okay. Where do you see Ethiopia as a country in the next 10 years if it stays on the current trajectory? You mentioned something like you heard expectations that Ethiopia can again go back to a 10% per year growth rate.
Correct. So our prime minister just a few days ago reiterated that Ethiopia is in line to get to 10% growth. And also he mentioned within 7 years, he expects Ethiopia to be the second largest economy in Africa, second to South Africa.
Okay, yeah.
And in 10 years, he expects it to be the largest. And so this is a very outsized ambition, if you will, beating countries like Nigeria and Egypt, South Africa. Somebody might call you crazy if you were to say Ethiopia is on track to do that. But our prime minister is optimistic. Technically, I think our dam is holding up, and our projects are increasing at a speed where that might be possible.
Nice. Talking about the dam, I keep getting like flashbacks of emails and messages that I often get when I talk about these topics. And that's the situation about the GERD, the hydro dam that you guys have, which is attached to the Nile River. And there's also some stories out there on the internet that Egypt is not very happy because it's supposedly, I believe, lowering the water level in the Nile and it's creating some tensions. What is the boots on the ground perspective on that situation and its neighboring country of Egypt?
Sure. And I think you're right. There has been great compromise and discretion between Ethiopia, Egypt, and our other neighbor, Sudan, regarding the building of the Nile. But when you look at the reporting of what's technically possible, Ethiopia can build another 10 dams without having too much effect on the water supply. Now, what it does allow Ethiopia to do is regulate the water supply going to Egypt. And so at times, it might even help them avert flooding, which has often been the case. And so I don't think there's any technical argument. There's often political argument.
Yep.
There's often, ways and reasons to scapegoat and to cause a crisis so that heroes can come in.
Yeah.
But we would not have built the dam if it was destructive to the ecology or to our neighbors. And so I think this shows a great deal of technical resolve by all participants. Yes, you'll have political baggage and inflammatory comments from left or right, but I think that's just the nature of media.
Yeah.
And I don't think it adds any substance to the issue. And Ethiopia is going to keep building because half of Ethiopians don't have electricity. Meanwhile, something like 98% of Egyptians have electricity. So for me, it's nonsensical to stop building because of a fear when we're facing very real realities today.
Yeah. Okay. That's an interesting perspective. Today, we've touched upon a few different levels. The Bitcoin mining industry, Ethiopia, but I would also like to pull the context a little bit wider. Currently, we have, USA, which is the predominant superpower, and China, the one that's challenging the US. One thing that I have experienced with my own eyes here in Ethiopia is that whenever we're driving on the road to the farm or whenever we're going to industrial areas or different neighborhoods, we see a lot of Chinese construction, a lot of Chinese activities happening here. And I've come to the understanding that currently Ethiopia is aligning itself a lot with China because Chinese bring a lot of capital, a lot of knowledge, a lot of partnerships here in this country. What is your take on this or on this development?
Absolutely. There is a strong leadership from the Chinese to come into Ethiopia. They've been bidding on a lot of our construction projects, helping us build roads and dams and bridges, airports, and so on. And they not only come to help us build as construction partners, but they come with finance. So they help us finance our projects.
Yeah.
And I think what's increasingly clear is Ethiopia, after joining the BRICS, is aligning itself more and more with the East. Not only have we joined the BRICS, but as a part of that, I think we have some allowances with the New Development Bank, also out of China. And so I think you're quite right. We have a lot of Chinese partners. And most recently, there's also talk of moving some of our debt from the US, from USD, into China, into yuan. And so I think this is going to create a competition. I think this is going to create a lot of investors coming in from the United States and saying, what about us? And the reason the West hasn't been involved yet is because of they don't have a lot of risk tolerance. They want everything to be kind of a setup for them. But the Chinese, they understand with the developing economies, things are a little gritty at times, and they're willing to pass through that grit, and they're being rewarded for that. And so I think as we develop, as we grow, we will attract more into our economy. But as of now, it's been a lot of Eastern heavy investment.
Nice. All right. One other question that I'm wondering, one other piece of critic or concern that I sometimes get from people around me is they wonder what level of corruption more or less is there in Ethiopia. Is it common that people need to be, how do you call it, greased?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a good question. The answer is most likely probably, right? And I say that because there was that issue at the IT park where the CEO was arrested. And I have a feeling, although that was not taken to trial and we haven't seen the conclusions of that, maybe that was related to corruption. And also, I understand that there is a federal anti-corruption office. It's an agency in the middle of town. And so investors that might have seen or heard something are encouraged to go to this agency. I don't have experience firsthand myself with the agency, but it does exist. So it tells me that there probably is a problem that they're addressing.
Yeah.
But when it comes to just a general conclusion on the subject, I would probably say there's no more corruption here than anywhere else in the world. In fact, because it's such a large country and there are so many eyes on it, since our civil war, since our home of the AU and UNECA, et cetera, we have so many journalists and the amount of media questionnaires and so on. We get a lot of press here asking hard questions, right?
Yeah.
So because of that, I feel like Ethiopia is more attractive than not.
Yeah, and let's be honest, I mean, corruption is happening all over the world. In the US, for example, it is now happening almost on a...
I think they've legalized it.
Yeah, it's almost practically legalized. Encouraged. In Indonesia, where I live, I mean, it's also very typical police officers asking for bribes on the street. But yeah, I really hope, not only in Ethiopia, but anywhere in the world. I mean, it's part of the system, but if they want to take it serious over the long term, it's good to hear that they've already taken these kind of governmental actions to trim that down.
Absolutely.
I would say let's wrap it up. I think we've covered a lot of ground in this interview. It was really refreshing to hear your perspective on all of these questions, all of these issues, questions that we often get. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Mitchell.
Your thoughts, and it is pleasure meeting you in person as well. And let's stay in touch.
Absolutely, thank you. Pleasure is all mine. Thank you for a great interview, great questions. Thank you for coming to Ethiopia, and it's a very thoughtful exercise, and I hope it shares information that's often not valued or often neglected by others in the media. So thank you for coming.
It was my pleasure.